To the Ottawa City Commission study session. I believe we have at least one commissioner on Zoom, so we do have a quorum. So we'll start with public comments. Do we have anybody registered?
That's me.
Great, thank you. All right, let's move on to items for presentation and discussion. The first one is an ordinance rezoning 2209 South Princeton from a C3 general commercial district to a mixed-use residential commercial district. Director Landis, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I do have some presentation slides for you, and they will really touch on both of your first two items. So the first one being a rezoning for the same property as the second one being a conditional use permit. They somewhat go hand in hand, although when they come before you as an approval item, will be considered separately. First slide, please. The first item in front of you is the rezoning for 2209 South Princeton Street. You probably currently know it as Days Inn. This is this property currently sits in the C3 General Commercial District, and with the rezone is being requested to be moved to a mixed-use residential commercial district. The property conversion will be from the existing hotel to a dormitory with approximately 80 beds. The property will be leased by the owner to Ottawa University as the dormitory or student housing. And currently, dormitory use is not permitted under the current zoning as a C3 for commercial use, but it is allowed under the MURC district. Next slide, please. This is a image on the left of the location, and on the right, a front image of the property. The surrounding land uses currently include low intensity commercials such as hotels, retail, restaurants, and fast food. Next slide. The general location again is the 2209 South Princeton. Our current zoning is C3, and the future land use maps actually show this as being commercial. Next slide. This one is just an aerial view to the east. There is Walmart, and then Princeton Street to the west. The mixed-use residential district, it facilitates a compatible mixed-use activity. And the reason that I want to go through this level of detail, it's not very much detail, but I know you'll understand that what they're wanting to do is switch it from general commercial to a mixed or to dormitory use. But there are some items, some things that are being considered by the Planning Commission when they consider a rezone and whether they recommend that to you. So I thought I'd just mention a couple of those items. One, the retention and attraction of businesses, workplaces, and residences through adaptive reuse and rehabilitation of existing buildings is perfect for this location. The key findings, two of them that were noted to the Planning Commission, was that the character of the neighborhood is commercial use. The building's current use is that of an open motel and therefore would not affect the change of the surrounding area. The rezoning from commercial to mixed use would allow student housing and dormitory use, which is consistent with the existing motel use, which is important. The comprehensive plan's goal, number 4, is for related to housing quality and diversity, and it specifically says support development of affordable and appropriate housing for all segments of the community. So even though the future land use map sees this as commercial and did not necessarily predict residential use of this property, it is in conformance with the comprehensive plan and the goal. It does fit also with a mixed use district or mixed use of this area because of the use by students in this area using your retail. They're close to a lot of those establishments that they would otherwise also visit. Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on July 12th. They received no public comments, and they did vote to accept the findings as they were presented to them and recommended approval to the City Commission. The way that this will come to you, should you choose to move it to a regular meeting, would be through an ordinance. I don't have the draft ordinance in the packet for you today. It would be available to you for the meeting. The recommended date would be the August 2nd regular meeting. There's nothing further that would need to happen between now and then on the rezoning issue. But if you would allow me to just move ahead with a little bit of discussion on the conditional use permit and how that ties together. Next slide, please. In order to use this property as a dormitory or for student housing, it does require conditional use because they're anticipating 80 beds. Anything over 30 beds requires conditional use and one parking space per bed in that dormitory or that student housing. So the conditional use permit would require a public hearing that has not yet been held. So everything related to the CUP today is informational only. That'll be held this Thursday. Sorry, I'm right in front of you. This Thursday at the regular study session meeting for the planning commission will be converted to a special meeting, and we will hold that public hearing on the CUP then. The item would then come back to you at the regular meeting on August 2nd. The reason for discussing it now with you is in case we do not have a study session on the 31st, which I don't know if a decision has been made there. I wanted to make sure that you had all of the information at one time so that you would know that this is really one whole, it's two decisions, but it's one package or one project being brought to you for consideration. Hopefully on August 2nd. As you can imagine, the university is hoping to move in students as soon as possible. Sooner than that would be preferable, but wouldn't be allowable until this was approved by the city commission. Next slide, please. This is just a snip from the zoning regulations to show that why it's a conditional use of this zoning. And next slide. And this is just to again state that the public hearing would be held this Thursday. So that's a little bit about the second item. And again, it would come to you in the form of an ordinance, also not available to you today. And until we've held that public hearing and the planning commission has discussed, I don't know whether there will be additional conditions placed on this project or how that will be presented to you. But I wanted to make sure that you knew ahead of time that this is that the two items are coming to you for consideration. The property owners are Ram Inc. and Big Bear Enterprises, and again, would be leasing the property to Ottawa University. So the two requests that are in front of you are both A and B on your agenda would be to move or to, I guess, move both items to your regular meeting on August 2nd. The second item, though, would be dependent upon approval by or recommendation by the planning commission.
I have a question about the parking spaces. Did you say there are adequate parking spaces as it is now for that many beds?
Right now, there's 90 parking places, and they just are in the process of demoing the pool area, which can create additional parking spaces.
And that's about the pool, I think it's one. Okay. And then I guess this is similar to what the Econo Lodge, what the Walker did with the Econo Lodge, I guess, or is that different?
Somewhat similar. So as far as a zoning perspective, it's similar, but that was being converted to apartments for lease or rental by anyone.
Okay.
And this is being put together specifically for lease to Ottawa
Okay.
University. Now, if they were to ever not lease that space from the owners, they would not, under the current or the proposed zoning, rezoning to mixed use residential commercial, would not be able to convert it back to a hotel, but they could use it for a variety of other reasons, like if they were to do additional conversion interior wise, they could also rent it out as apartments. Being under this, they could also add retail space to it, which it doesn't have right now. Some other side notes are they don't intend to have any food on or any dining services at this facility. They will provide a shuttle for students to and from campus every day. One of the items that was brought up during the study session for planning commission was traffic and the impact on that intersection. It's kind of tricky as it sits right now. But only about, I can't remember, I think it's about 40%, let's say 40, on average, 40 cars would be even brought for the 80 beds. Probably less. Most of their students don't actually bring a car with them to college, and then also providing the shuttle service that prevents a lot of cars coming to and from. Also, limited parking spaces at campus would make it easier for them to actually use the shuttle instead of driving to and from campus.
And then are we required or anybody in any way to check with the neighbors as a courtesy to what's coming into this location? Do we do that on commercial or do we just do that kind of in residential areas? as a courtesy, let the people know what's coming in, or
So they were
give them
all.
a chance to verbalize any kind of opinions they have.
Yes, for both of these items, that's the public hearing, and everyone within 200 feet received a notice of the public hearing. It's been published and, yeah,
Okay, good.
public hearing. Mhm.
Great, thank you. And will the owners remain? I forgot to ask that too. Is this, the owners are gonna stay the same, or are they selling the hotel?
So these currently, these owners, the Omsai Ram Inc. and Big Bear Enterprises just purchased
They bought-
the
okay.
hotel. With the idea of converting it to student housing and dormitory use and leasing it to Ottawa University.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Mhm. Certainly. Do you have other questions? Thanks for consideration.
Is there a time reference or an ASAP kind of thing? What are we looking at in time frame?
So the recommendation would be that you move this to your August 2nd regular meeting for consideration. The public hearing has not yet been held for the conditional use permit. That will be this Thursday. And so your next actual regular meeting is August 2nd. We can talk about it again on the 31st if the city commission is having a study session on the 31st. I think that was in question because it's the 5th Monday, and even though we didn't have the first Monday study session, I don't know that we've made a decision then, but we wanted to make sure we got it in front of you prior to a regular meeting.
Okay.
Commissioners, do you have any other questions for Director Landis on either item A or B?
Commissioner Kaler here. I do have questions on if this is to be treated like a dormitory, so will it be staffed like a dormitory? Will it be, or is that all part of the conditional use, or are we having that conversation then, or just wondering how that looks?
My understanding is that it would be staffed like a dormitory, that they would have resident assistants, and that they, a couple of the rooms that already exist would be used and converted for that use. So not every room in the existing property is going to be used as a dorm room. They will have an activity area, and then there would be RAs on staff there. But that is something that I can confirm.
Thank you. So that also means that they'll have like a common space in there that they're going to be converting, or creating a common space for residents there.
I believe that it will have a common space. They won't have dining services there, but I believe that they were going to have an open common space.
Thank you.
Mhm. One other thing I might mention is the piece that we don't have nailed down yet on this property, and it really isn't here for your consideration, but you might have questions as related to security of the facility. And they are proposing a fence to surround the facility. However, we have a preliminary plan that's come to us for that, but lots of questions, and it needs to be reviewed by our fire department and by just our planning, our building codes anyway. So I don't have a lot of information on that quite yet. I know that they were anticipating 2 gates to access the parking around the existing property, but again, I don't have a lot of details on that yet, but we'll have to work through some of those issues with that fence.
Our first gated community, huh?
Yes.
Yes. Any other questions, commissioners?
Personally, I'm fine with moving it on to the August 2nd meeting. I know we typically have this for a couple of weeks to talk about, but this is something that's so vitally important to our community, get it going as soon as possible. And housing, we need housing, right, Paul? We need housing. That's a good sign that the university needs this kind of facility because they're showing expansion as well. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody when I look at it. So I'd be in favor of moving it forward.
I agree. I think, like you had mentioned, that if in the future you
I
doesn't
can-
utilize it, at least.
Go ahead,
I
Commissioner.
concur
Taylor.
with what Commissioner Skidmore says. But I do think that because this is the first time that this has actually been presented and the public is hearing about it, I don't think it's a bad idea that if we have our 31st meeting, to go ahead and have it on the agenda, just so that we can address any issues that may come up. I don't anticipate there being a tremendous amount of issues, but I can always anticipate wrong.
So Commissioner, since that's been mentioned a couple times now, that was actually one of the comment I was gonna have later on was about the 31st meeting. I don't think we've ever had an answer about whether we want to have that or not. It certainly would give us something to talk about next week, and I think even Mike might have something to add to it. So it wouldn't be the only item on the agenda. So are we okay with having a meeting next Monday for the 31st?
I'm fine.
Commissioner Kaler?
Commissioner Kaler is fine with that. It doesn't matter one way or the other.
We will do that. Then if that's the case, are we okay with moving this on to next Monday's agenda then?
Yeah. Let's do that.
Okay, that's what we'll do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna move item E up, the memorandum of agreement with the Kansas Forest Service. Chief Matthias? Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioner. Well, this has been on our agenda or thought for quite some time. Back in March of 21, we reached out to the Kansas Forest Service, and we had went through some preliminary training for our folks. 17 members of our folks were qualified as a firefighter too, and they have to do a red card program and a PAC program and all that. And since then, we've gained some equipment through grants and through a budgetary process that we're ready to move on to an agreement with the Forest Service, State Forest Service. I believe Mark Neely is on, but Sean, I turned this over to Assistant Chief Sean Dillon. He's been the driver of this item since it started, so I'm going to turn it over to him and let him explain it all.
I'll do my best. I was hoping Mark would be on to answer all of your questions above my authority. So, like Chief said, we've been kind of looking at this for a little while now. The agreement would be, so initially, we can't do this on our own. You have to be trained to a higher level to take like a fire truck or something like that. So they have what's called a module, and you use the state's equipment. We would provide our PPE and personnel and basically just go with them. That allows us to be able to get a book checked off. It's pretty extensive. A lot of it you can't do just through classroom. You actually have to do the hands-on portion of it. So that would be looking at like 2 to 3 individuals. We would try to start with the officers because you want to move them up to what's called like an engine boss. And that would allow us later to be able to actually deploy our equipment and go out with like a task force. There's some benefits to the department. So when you're on a large scale incident like that, you really get into the incident command system. And that involves like all of your planning, your finance, logistics, all that kind of stuff. So if we ever had a big incident here in Ottawa, we would feel a lot more comfortable with that. Some other benefits, potentially opens us up to grant funding. We recently did receive a grant from the Forest Service. It was a 50-50 split for a new chainsaw. Try to prepare us for more wildland stuff. You can use that for once we got on the task force, the AFG that we put in for pretty regularly, adding that into your comments, that can help you get approved or denied. You can get reimbursed if it's a reimbursable event. So they'll reimburse you for personnel costs. Once we can start sending out equipment, you can get reimbursed for that, fuel. And the thought was to try to, this isn't like the main reason why we wanted to do this, but put some of that stuff back into the reserve. So when we had to replace PPE or vehicles or something like that, we're actually bringing something back in. Mark would be able to explain the reimbursements a little better than me, so.
So once you jump into this realm of response, we could go throughout the state and even nationally if required. I know, believe it or not, Kansas Forestry Service, they had been dispatched to Alaska twice already this year to help mitigate wildland fires up there. And when I say the Forestry Service, it might be one or two individuals that work full-time with those folks, but once it's deemed a national disaster or state disaster, it's all reimbursable. And there's a process to that, many forms, just like any type of government program. There's more forms than there is anything else. So I think this would give us a, so you ask yourself, how does this benefit the citizens of Ottawa? I think in a couple of things. Hey, it gives our folks over there a tremendous amount of knowledge and training and skill set that if something happens in or near Ottawa and Franklin County, our folks would be very, very comfortable in handling any large scale incident. Just right now, there's fairly good size grass fire going out on the west side of Franklin County with the wind and dry conditions going on. It's just only going to get worse. And so with us having more rural property annexed into the city limits, we will see that increase in the wildland fires. And the city of Hutchinson lost it was probably about a year ago, a group of homes that was right outside the city. It was in the city proper, but $300,000 or $400,000, $500,000 homes. They burn up the whole subdivision because of wildland. So that's what we're trying to prevent, and it is reimbursable, and we can put some of that money back. It will be reimbursable at a higher rate if our folks go out on a national event. The federal government pays blank for a firefighter, and sometimes that's more than what we pay firefighters. And so, and that when we are able to take out a fire truck, that's where you really can make some money. It's a couple $100 a day for that truck. And we know of very near departments to our location that have been able to pay off a truck in 1 or 2 years on deployments going across the country. And so I think it's a win-win for everybody. It just takes this signing this agreement to get the ball rolling. This being nationally deployed probably is a 2 to 3, 4 year process, but we will be able to go out within the state. You've kind of heard our governor pre-staged some fire assets when we have red flag days. So the Forestry Service will pick a part of the state that may be at high risk for wildland fires for that day or that week, and they'll pre-deploy assets out there. So we'll be able to do that. And it's like you just kind of sit and wait and see what happens. The state has aerial assets now. They have two fire tankers. They're old forestry airplanes out of Hutch. And then Kansas National Guard, I think 6 of their Black Hawk units are trained at wildland firefighting. So who would have thought, Kansas would have air assets for grass fires or wildland fires, but we do, and they've been used often. So
The last thing when I first saw this, I thought, well, we don't have much in the way of forestry in Kansas or near here. But try to tell that to people near Medicine Lodge 3 years ago when half the county burned up, and even my own backyard, you remember a few years ago, caught on fire. And so you look at this and thinking, wow, it could happen in a massive windstorm like we've had before, and like you said, more in the future possibly. The flip side to that will be that our firefighters are trained in an area where they would be appealing to go to other communities, suddenly that makes them more valuable.
It does,
So-
yeah.
so, But I guess you
Yeah.
take the good with the bad, but.
Well, yeah, I
try
mean, we don't
protect
want to hold back our folks from getting more knowledge and skill
them.
set
No, I
that
agree totally.
could help us, but yes, that is always a catch 22, yeah.
Good, but it-
You know, if you look at the acres burned across the country, Kansas is always in the top 3 to 4 states across the nation in acres burned. In grass and wildland fires, so. You take Colorado and California, number 1 and 2, Kansas is typically 3, 4,
And
so,
that's unintentional burns, right?
yeah,
Okay.
so.
So this is just an agreement to co-op with the Kansas
Yep.
Forestry Service in case they need help or assistance to reach out to us, or if we were to need service or
Yep.
some sort of assistance, we could reach out to them.
And we can do that currently. We don't need a co-op for asking for their help. It's us being able to go out and help other communities within the state for the first couple, 3 or 4 years, and then after that, the national scene may come on board, but yeah, we need this cooperative to be able to move forward. It does open up some grants. It does open up some military surplus vehicles if we see the need that we might need those. So I believe it's a win-win. So,
Well, I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think being good neighbors is what we should be doing, whether it's neighbors in the next county or next state, so. I think it's a great idea.
On this for mobilization, are you able to say that you can't send anyone?
yes, so absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. They could call in and say, hey, we need to mobilize your group, your task force. And we have first dibs to say no. And that's just with any of mutual aid with the state. If we can't go, we can't go. And we're not gonna run our folks short, our citizens here in town short, just to go outside the city or the county or the state. So
So if you have those red flag days that they come up with, you can call the fire desk and you can tell them that, hey, we're available, or sometimes they will just reach out, but we can kind of preemptively take care of that.
Yeah.
Does this affect or benefit our ISO rating, or does it do anything with that, you know?
that's a good question. I don't know. I think with some of the equipment that we might be able to gain from the state, it could. I'm not sure on the training. Typically ISO is just strictly on structure fires.
And with the reimbursement, is it built in with the people traveling for per diem? Any of that type of stuff that's all built into however long people are gone that?
Yeah,
And one way that they do it now, because it used to take a little while to get reimbursed, so Kansas State University has basically been the broker for it. And so they'll reimburse and then they'll wait for whoever to kick it back in. So it's instead of months, it's down to like
14 days, I think is what you said.
Oh,
Because in the past, it was months before they got reimbursed and people started to pull out of their agreement, and so K-State, and that's the home of the forestry service for the state of Kansas is at K-State.
So, Commissioner Kaler here, I have a question about, I recognize what you're talking about the reimbursement if we were to utilize our trucks. However, that's because the wear and tear on our trucks is actually the citizen's responsibility to address that. So what if one of our trucks was destroyed? What would happen then?
Well, our insurance, and then that when we are deployed, they're underneath the state's insurance also.
So the insurance for the city comes first, or the city or the state? If it depends on, if it's a state.
Yeah, so if it's a state deployment, then the state will come first and the city will augment that.
And so
Another-
I appreciate, go ahead, sorry.
So another benefit to that too is they were out there so it has to be like a type 1, type 2 incident. So a very large incident. They bring in all kinds of resources from out. So there'll be mechanics on site. If we blow a tire, they'll replace the tire right there. If we had a chainsaw go down, they'll swap us 1 for 1, or if they have somebody there, they can fix it, so. We rip clothing, because it's a different kind of PPE, so it's not like your traditional bunker gear. And so that stuff can kind of, especially if you're out in the brush, it can rip, they'll replace that 1 for 1.
So I appreciate the fact that you talked about the first right of refusal. You can just kind of say like, no, we can't do that right now because we're short-staffed or whatever. Because we certainly don't want citizens to think that, hey, yeah, our priority is to go ahead and just send all of our fire trucks out to help others and then leave our city vulnerable. That certainly is that the help shed some light on that for a citizen if they were to ask that question.
Yeah, so we had the first right of refusal to not go. And when we would be deployed, we're only talking maybe 2 to 3 people at the most. Once we get going, it's not gonna be a full shift or anything. And it could be here in the beginning, could be just one person. But we still have the right to refuse deployment. But yeah, once we foresee getting up and running, we're looking at maybe 3 people in a truck. So, but yes, absolutely. We'll try to forecast. Typically, they're on a 14-day deployment. Once that 14 days are up, they could come home or they might get redeployed. We've heard of people, Gardner Fire Department has a cooperative with the Forestry Service, and they've been out on multiple 14-day deployments in a row just because of the fire season and needing the help. So
It could potentially open up avenues for low cost or grant assisted purchases for things like a rural urban interface, brush rig, or things like that you would see that the Forest Service might be getting rid of, that then we might capitalize on and could deploy that asset as opposed to like an urban engine company.
yes. Yeah, and so once you have the grants really start to open up once you have an established program. A lot of grants won't fund a brand new program. They want to see the program up and running and doing well. And then a lot more grants. You're more successful at grants once you've been established and have a program that's running well. So.
Commissioners.
As I said, I think it looks good. I like the idea. I do say I'd like our attorney to go through the whole contract works with the fine tooth comb, make sure we're getting in what we should be and all, but that concern I would have, so.
That's all I was gonna say is that obviously we feel more comfortable having the attorney review any contract before it's voted on, but I think being a good neighbor, like you had stated, if we ever need people to come here, yeah, it makes sense to do the same for them.
And do you want to move it to the 31st meeting? That way we could have any input from our city attorney if there is anything.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure we had somebody from the state dialed in for today, but they might have became busy. So, but we'll try again to have a representative. Just maybe they can explain a little bit better. Hopefully they're not busy fighting a forest fire.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we'll move it to the 31st then. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
All right, item C is the consensus to seek requests for proposals for sale of the city's fiber utility. City manager?
Mr. Mayor, as you know, the city operates a fiber utility, and that utility was created out of a need to serve our business community and our educational institutions in town. It was never intended, just because of the scale, to be a full-blown utility, and that the intention, as I understand it, and both Paul and Dennis can speak to it in greater detail than I, but it was never the intention that the city would ever become a full-fledged service provider for internet services. And as such, with the growth that's occurred in the area, just in my short tenure here, we've been contacted by 2 service providers who are interested in acquiring the utility infrastructure, meaning the fiber that we have currently in place. And their plan would be to run fiber directly from that system to homes directly. That's something that we currently do not have for residential neighborhoods, and in limited capacity, it's provided for with some of our customers currently. But if either Paul or Dennis want to speak in greater detail on the history and condition, as well as our city attorney, who's been engaged in some of those conversations and we've been contacted, please feel free to do so.
Just come up if you have any questions that I can answer.
Will we need to start buying the service after, and if we sell this from somebody?
Well, that's a good question. Those are the things that can be put into this RFP. You know, long term, because obviously we'll still need this fiber that we're using right now. But you can have lease back options in there for 30 years, which is essentially the life of the fiber. So that we can continue to use what we need. But, you know, we're just trying to be fair for everyone who's already in town and who wants to come to town and who wants to use our network. This is the fair way to kind of make that happen.
And again, this is just to authorize staff to construct and distribute an RFP. It's important to note that, as I stated in the last line of the analysis in italics, that the city commission may reject any and all bids received. So it's not that you're tying your hands with respect to this. We have an estimated value, but this would actually, you know, they always say it doesn't matter what you say the value is or what the accountants say the value is. It only matters with what price you can get for that asset.
I think it's important to note too, that we've been talking to these companies for 2 years. And they are ready to get on the ground. We think it's important that we utilize what we've built. They will come in around us if we don't utilize what we've built. And so to get the best bang for the buck, so to speak, to either sell or lease, and like Paul said, there's a number of options that we have not explored completely yet with these companies, and that's the reason for the RFP. So that we can get the most out of what we have done over a period of almost 10 years now. You know, that we've been doing this fiber network.
And I think, like you mentioned, it's huge that we've done a lot of the groundwork, no pun intended, to get something in place. Sorry, I beat you to that.
Yeah,
I knew you were coming that way. I think, you know, COVID and all of that was really highlighted the importance of high-speed internet at home. As most of us, I'm sure, work from home throughout that a lot. I think this opens the door to some great opportunities, and I think some really good things for citizens, as well as, you know, potentially offloading and brings kind of some funds back into us as well.
We have a number of issues, you know, that we haven't even talked about. I mean, security issues, you know, related to police department, to finance, to the like FERC and NERC on the electric side, the water side. You know, we've got security issues that we've got to make sure that we take care of. But we're going to be able to do that, you know, and that's the reason that we're asking to be able to write this RFP and take it to these folks.
I like the idea. I think it'd be a great way if we got an asset that's valuable to somebody and we can get a decent price for it. I see no problem with selling it. I'm fine with that if we get that one. But yeah, we'll take the RFPs, take a look at those and see if they come in.
And on some of those things that you were talking for the electric and stuff, would we need to bring in a third party to guide us on some of those requirements on terms of what they take versus what we have, or is that
No, I
something
don't
in-house
believe
we can take care of?
I believe we can do all of that in-house. We have enough expertise between Paul and his department and the way he works with the other departments to deal with. We're dealing with it now. You know, so it's really not something different that we would be doing. It's making sure that we continue to do what we're doing.
And there may be segments that have no commercial value that we don't even sell, to solve some of that, so.
And that's what I was asking earlier, if maybe part of the contract would be we can lease back for $1 a year to have a good deal here from City Hall to be able to continue on with our
Yeah.
service. So,
Yeah, and I think that's when we go to evaluate these, that the price would be important, but I think there would be a lot of other factors and metrics that, some of that stuff would calculate in.
we're kind of in the driver's seat, so it's a good place to be. So, yeah.
Like you said, I think this is good to open the door to the conversation.
Absolutely.
So commissioners, do we have a consensus to seek a request for the proposals for the sale of the city's fiber utility?
Yeah, I'm good.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. You have consensus.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, item D is the City Hall security upgrades, the bid update with our city manager. Paul, if you want to.
This is a rare IT double header. So we went through the whole bid process for the security project, the construction portion of it. Only received one bid that was significantly higher than we expected. It's not a budget buster, but as you can see, it pushes us right to the limit, which we usually don't like to be. So kind of the options were, you could approve the bid, you could reject the bid, or you could authorize us to kind of negotiate and try to get a little cost savings here and there. The contractor was here at the pre-bid contractor walkthrough. One of their concerns was the scheduling, that the bid had a 90-day window for the scheduling, and they were concerned because they were essentially working on every entrance and exit for the building, and so they would want to phase that out a little more. So I haven't talked to him yet, but that's one potential cost savings if we can work with their schedule maybe, and which may take longer than 90 days, but it may chop it up into phases and try to figure out some ways to cut the cost a little bit.
I'm in favor of certainly having that conversation to speak with Boyd Builders to see if they can come up with any cost savings. And I think at this point, we've been without some of this security for, well, up till now.
Right.
So, I mean, if it's, another 30 or 60 days to save us some money, I'm in favor of having that conversation.
I would agree. I would definitely option 2 is the one that I was leaning towards as well.
2 for me too.
Commissioner Kaler?
I'm in favor of option 2 also. I do also want to note that I do think that I'd like to see the security stuff move forward as quickly as possible. Security is a huge issue.
All right.
I guess you may be able to, Melanie, speak to what would be an issue if our total, like you said, we're at 229, 555, comes in at 237. Does that 7,000 come from?
We would have,
Or
yeah, well, it would come from a capital fund, and we would work through that with Melanie and finance. Melanie and Rebecca, and yeah. But we believe that the estimate that's here is based on the bid received and the engineering and construction administration's firm as well. So the only real wiggle room would be the door access equipment and softwares that's integrated. So any overage we anticipate being minimal, but if we might be able to create some, for lack of a better phrase, project contingency by working directly with the contractor to increase the timeline or create some value engineering on the improvements, then that's certainly what we would look to do.
Well, and to continue with Commissioner Kaler's comment, is there something that, or part of the project that can be started from Lloyd Builders to at least get the ball rolling? What was the original start date? October 1st?
Yeah, October. And that would be another piece, and maybe they could start sooner on, and maybe we're scheduling around some of their other projects, and so maybe that timeline is not necessarily set in stone.
I'd also like to see if we can get a discount on the permit fee.
That's
You didn't hear me.
I think it's correct. I think any part of, any part of the conversation that you can have, whether it's extending the time frame, but certainly as Commissioner Kaler mentioned, maybe starting some sort of the project, some part of the project, that'd be great.
Agree.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you, Paul. All right, that'll move us on to comments by our city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and city commissioners. Some highlights for the week ahead and the week that just occurred. The water distribution and wastewater collection crews. They continued their cleaning on the south side of town and visual inspection of the sewer lines with television camera, and then also initiated the construction for that 8-inch water main along East Ninth between Cherry and Lincoln Street. And this week they'll work to continue on that project, as well as performing 3 spot repairs to the sanitary sewer mains that are scheduled for rehabilitation. Water reclamation, the crews worked on the grounds and facilities maintenance, and the highlight last week was the draining, cleaning, and inspecting of clarifier number 2. This week, they're going to be focused on the annual performance as well for the draining, cleaning, and inspection of the plant's uncovered digester. The electric production items to note is they did start the installation for that fiber broadband utility extension to serve the Ottawa Rec Commission building. And also note that generators 6 and 7 were called upon to generate power on the 13th and 17th of last week, with Unit 4 operating on a maintenance run for July 17th. And the generation units successfully completed their capability testings for this year. And this week will see production crews finishing that fiber installation and proceeding with maintenance of the substation transformers, including oil samples that are required. Distribution, those crews highlighted the right-of-way tree trimming maintenance along Ash and the Cottonwood lift station route, where that line's being extended, and they worked to replace utility poles, Wilson and Locust, and they're working with pole replacements on 7th Street, as well as in the 1000 block in North Poplar, and continuing with the right-of-way maintenance, tree trimming. The warehouse continues to move parts and materials into the building after the new construction of shelving and rack labels. Public Works Street crews, we've got the Maple Street paving preservation, the reconcrete, the pouring new concrete there in the 1200 block at South Maple continues. They also conducted pothole patrol on the north side of town. This week we'll see them finishing up on the north side of town with pothole patrol and moving that to the southeast part of town. And also you'll notice that the public notice for the South Princeton paving project, which is the joint rehabilitation for the concrete down there, started today. So from the 24th to the 13th, that area will be reduced to 1 lane in each direction for that project. Parks and Cemetery showed our folks participating in KMU leadership training with the superintendent DJ Welch, Greg Morrow and Tate Jackson attending that training. And they also completed work on the water service trailer and began painting the pedestrian bridge. So, you know, so it looks like it's been primered along those rails, and they're beginning the painting, finishing that this week, and also working to complete the sidewalk for the fitness court running from the Prairie Spirit Trail to that fitness court. With also want to highlight that fleet maintenance completed 3 preventative maintenance services, 4 repairs, and they had 4 vehicles in progress for repair currently. Police department, they're working to coordinate our problem-oriented service activities in the area that shepherds all the city resources into a geographic area where they're seeing an uptick in activities. They also conducted police officer candidate testing with HR on July 20th, where we had 3 candidates test. 1 failed the written, 1 failed the physical, and 1 candidate has successfully progressed to the background portion of the investigation. That means that he is one of 2 candidates for the Department 6 vacancies. So we have a second candidate that tested earlier in July who's undergoing the polygraph as we speak, or at least this week. Also want to highlight that Chief reports that the DARE Camp and National Night Out are approaching. So we'll have DARE Camp on the 4th, 5th, and 6th, the National Night Out on Tuesday, August 1st. I've included a flyer for the National Night Out event with this report. The fire department, we've received the preliminary comprehensive fire department study from the Center for Public Safety Management. The study was funded with ARPA funds and is going to cost $29,975, and it assesses our department's compensation, work schedule, alternate response vehicles, staffing and deployment of resources, fire station facility conditions and response locations, fleet management, fire risk analysis, accreditation, first response protocols, EMS response, as well as performance measurement and key performance indicators, our fire prevention and code enforcement, education and training, emergency management, and interagency relationships. Neighborhood and community services. The Planning Commission will have their meeting on Thursday, July 27th at noon. And it'll include the CUP items that you discussed earlier in this meeting and that we'll see again at the July 31st regular meeting. Planning and zoning item, again, we discussed. We had a meeting with Mayor Crowley, City Attorney Finch, Director Landis, Building Inspector Terry Elmer, and I with an area builder to discuss concerns with certain requirements for lot splits and building permits in the development process. And we sought to find ways to improve communication with area builders and developers. The takeaway from our meeting is that the city is more closely following longstanding requirements for surveys on lot splits and building permits, as well as floor elevations to ensure we comply with our obligations under the agreements with the federal government on flood mapping. However, staff will be proactively communicating and notifying area builders and developers to avoid any sort of confusion surrounding this approach. And also, when the new director is on board, we'll work to find ways to streamline the process and reduce redundancies. And on that front, I'm pleased to report that we have a candidate who has accepted an employment offer contingent upon our post-offer screening process for the Director of Neighborhood and Community Services. So we'll now begin that background investigation, and we anticipate a start date mid to late August, and a formal announcement will be crafted once the screening process is complete. Along the topic of human resources, as you know, the HR assisted with the police department candidates. We currently also have a new street department employee, Noah Potter, and he began his employment on July 17th as a maintenance worker 1. We have a vacancy within the electric production division, and that department is interviewing a candidate for electric production operator. The city has 16 current applications for our vacant positions, and we received the draft compensation study from McGrath, and it's been received and reviewed by directors Wap, Landis, and myself. We anticipate the need for an additional 3-week period as employees have follow-up questionnaires to complete. Other items of note, we have the Kansas Park Fitness Court ribbon cutting with Blue Cross Blue Shield and the National Fitness Campaign for the Make Fitness Free for Everyone, and where we'll have a ribbon cutting for our state-of-the-art outdoor fitness court, and that'll be on Friday, July 28th at 8 a.m. in Kansas Park. I've included the notification for that. Also, the National Night Out flyer I spoke of previously. It's time again for the annual Fusion Business Expo that'll take place with Ottawa University on Tuesday, August 8th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Legacy Square, and anyone that is a business that wishes to participate can utilize the attached information to the flyer to respond by July 26th to Ottawa University for participation in that event, and then included the notification for the Princeton Street paving project. So that concludes my my comments and report for the meeting. If there are no questions for myself or anyone else on the city team.
Commissioners, any questions? All right, we'll move on to comments by our city commissioners. Commissioner Taylor,
None at this time.
Commissioner Clayton,
At this time.
Mayor Pro Tem Skidmore.
I'll just say briefly, I noticed the painting on the rail trail bridge. That looks nice. I've driven that or ridden that several times and never really noticed that it needed it until you started painting it. It looks nice. So I appreciate you doing that, guys. And it looks really nice. I think it'll be a real plus for our community when people see that. And also Chief Weingartner, if you want to bring up about your award that Larrabee received from the state with regard to their position, is that something new for him or what's that status?
Yeah, Larrabee Alexander is our DARE officer, one of 3 DARE officers that we have. And his supervisor nominated him for the State DARE Officer of the Year. And the Kansas Juvenile Officers Association selected him for that. And in fact, next Monday or Tuesday, he's gonna be down in Wichita to receive the awards. Once he has that award in hand, we'll have it back here with him and make a formal presentation in front of the commission to recognize his efforts as the DARE Officer of the Year. It's perfectly timed, leading right into DARE.
I was gonna say, look at that, amazing timing, but I just wanted, I recognize that our local people,
We're playing that.
our local people have been recognized statewide, and so I appreciate that. I know it's a lot of effort that Larry puts in that program and well-deserved honor, so that's it.
Thank you.
You bet. That's all I had.
Thank you. I have no comments. Do have a few announcements. Next week, July 31st, we will have our study session here at 4 p.m. And then August 2nd is our regular meeting at 7 p.m. here at City Hall. Is there anything else to come before the commission this afternoon? I'll adjourn.